So, Charles, thanks very much for joining us. Got with me Charles Guillemet, who is Ledger's CTO. How long have you been with Ledger?
I joined Ledger 5 years ago, so it's a long time now. I'm an OG in the company. When I joined, that was a small startup. Now a lot of things have changed. What a journey!
And your job has changed too, right? What was the job that you came in to do? Because I don't think it was CTO.
Yeah, when I joined, so that was a small startup. We were around 45. And I really remember the day I joined. I met Nicolas, who was the CTO at this time. And Nicolas showed me an empty room. There was nothing, like not even desks. There was nothing. And he told me, hey, this is here that you have to create the security department of Ledger. I was a little bit surprised, to be honest. But that was incredibly exciting to have a blank page and being able to write your own story. So yeah, at first my mission was to create the security department. So I was a chief security officer at first.
And that the security department is what is today known as the donjon, no?
Exactly. We called it the dungeon because this empty room is a little bit hidden. There is hidden stairs who go upstairs. So that's why we decided to call it the dungeon. And this is a small group of people who are incredibly good at security, cryptography, hardware, software, and now they are also focusing on blockchain security.
And so why did Ledger create the dungeon 5 years ago?
I think that was the vision of Nicolas, Eric, Pascal at this time. They definitely wanted to create a security company. Like the value proposition of Ledger was security, and when you are involved in security, there was something for sure. The best way to know if your product is secure is to try to break it. You have to do this again and again, and it's a never-ending story. You have to try to break it and this is doing that you are able to improve the security to raise the bar for security. So the mission was definitely this, trying to break the product in order to improve it.
And I mean, first of all, I love this part about the company. And for listeners who haven't seen it, there's a great series on Ledger's YouTube called Enter the Donjon, which shows the team doing what it is they do. So we don't need to spend too much time on it here. People can go watch that if they want to know. And I'd like to move on to your current role as CTO of Ledger. But I think what I find really interesting, first of all, in all sincerity, I really enjoy working with you. Like I think that the level of technical skill is extraordinary, but also you're quite you have like the users and the business in mind in the way that you approach, and that's not always true with people in technology, right? Some people just like to build cool things, and they're almost resentful of the commercial side of it. But I think you have a great balance of skills and the rest of the picture. But also the thing I find interesting, I studied computer science, but I really know extremely little about what is your kind of core métier, as we would say here in France, or craft is what we would say in America. So tell me, like, how did you come to have the technical skill that you have? Where did you study? What did you study? What were your interests? How did you cut your teeth?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I think I started to get interested in this when I was 12. When I got a computer, the first thing I wanted to do was to try to understand how things work. I'm a curious person. I want to really understand how things work. And when you really understand how something works, you can find a way to use it in another way. This is what hacking is. It's thinking differently, and this is really how I am. I really have this adversarial thinking when I really want to understand things and try to see it another way. And when you do that, this is what we call hacking. And when I was 12, so when I got a computer, I really wanted to understand how this machine are working, how internet was working. And as soon as you have a challenge, a problem to solve, then hacking is the way to solve it. I remember at this time, internet was, you didn't have unlimited internet. And my mother allowed me to have 200 francs of internet a month. but that was definitely not enough. Very quickly, in 1 week, I was spending these 200 francs. So I had to find a way to understand how these ISP were working, and if it's possible to have internet for free. And I quickly find a way to do that. And I think this was my first hack, like hacking my internet service provider in order to have free internet.
It's so funny. I've heard that story more than once. Actually, Tony Fadell has a similar story. He wanted to use BBSs, so that's how he became a phone freaker. I wonder how many people the telco industry made into hackers. I would love. It seems like you could have a book just on, how many hackers were created by the sort of, like overreach of telco freight, fee models.
Yeah, that's true. And after that, I've studied pure mathematics because I really like mathematics. I really like abstraction, thinking out of the box, taking a step back and trying to understand things in an abstract way. So I really enjoy that. And at some point, I wanted to become a mathematician. I wanted to do research in mathematics. And at some point, I understood the system in France, especially for mathematical research and so on. I was a little bit frustrated to understand how this system is working. So discussing with my professor, they encouraged me to go to computer science also, because I was also passionate by computer science, but I was studying mathematics. And so this is when I decided to study computer science more theoretically, because I really had a very practical knowledge of computer science. And then, so I studied computer science. And when you do mathematics, computer science, and you want to work in this area, cryptography is the best way, because you have pure mathematics with all this algebra and all this abstraction, and you have computer science because at some point cryptography needs to be implemented. So this is how I decided to study cryptography. That was a little bit more than 15 years ago, and at this time cryptography was a little bit dusty. Like this was not something cool as it is today. So it's crazy to see that it became cool, but at this time that was a little bit dusty, something for mathematician guy who are working in their lab, not talking to people and so on. And with blockchain, in 10 years, like the field of cryptography did a huge jump. Like a lot of research has been done in zero knowledge, in multi-party computation, in signature scheme, in post-quantum crypto. Like in only 10 years, a lot of progress has been done in this area. This is really, really interesting. So this is what I studied. And then I worked more in security, because cryptography and security are not exactly the same thing. Cryptography is really something mathematical. You write equation and you make sure that the equation allows you to encrypt, sign, and you have all the property you need. But when it comes to implement it, you have new challenges, because your equation can be okay, but if your implementation is not, you can break the security of your system, even if the equations are correct. So after that, I worked more in the security area.
I know exactly what you mean too, by the way. When I was studying computer science in the early 90s, people would go talk to somebody else at the party. But even just a few years later, suddenly, even just computers were something that were in the average person's life. Then I think what happened, in the years since, and I'm quite a few years older than you, depending on, everything's relative. But is that, it's become much more about applied computing, right? And cryptography has become like an integral part of our lives. I was really surprised. I was listening to Scott Galloway's podcast one day. He was talking to a Harvard dean, if I recall correctly. They were talking about things like the future of education and had absolutely nothing to do with crypto. And Scott asked him at the end of the interview, if you had one bit of advice to give, a young person who's just entering college, what would it be? And out of nowhere, the guy said, understand cryptography. And I almost fell out of my chair when I heard him say it, because I thought, oh, wow, but what I realized is that's kind of like telling someone to understand the internet in, 1992. right? Knowing that this will be an increasingly important part of our lives, good advice to young people who want to be successful in the future would be to understand this quite complex thing, which is going to be, is going to have an increased relative importance. So I'm curious, if you were talking to, a young woman or a young man, who was kind of entering college at the moment, would your advice then be similar relative to cryptography, relative to security? Like what's the interesting field of study for tomorrow, do you think?
In general, I think science and technology is a very promising field in general. And if you zoom in a little bit more in technology, from my perspective, there are two main revolutions ongoing. The first one is blockchain. And for blockchain, there are different aspects. Cryptography is a very important one, but you have also distributed system. You have also plenty of things around computer science, but cryptography is at the core of that. And there is another field which is not related, but which is also continuing to boom, which is AI, like machine learning and so on. I think we don't understand yet how it will impact the society and so on. I think this is another revolution ongoing.
So I want to turn to the security of Ledger and in 1 second, but there's one more thing I really find fascinating that I think that you're both an example of and you have some insight in. And, there's the joke that you're hard pressed to find a crypto project anywhere in the world without French people on the team. And I think it's interesting that, you were advised to go into cryptography 15 years ago. And I think that says something about where you were studying and who you were studying with. And I think is actually quite, unique to the experience that you had in university here in France. Why is it that, cryptography and security are a métier of France, and, you have so much great engineering talent from here with this skill?
It's a good question. First of all, if you think about the education system in France, there is something which is quite unique. The way we are selecting students in order to get the best student for a specific study, let's say, we are selecting them with mathematics. Like if you are good in math, you can get good engineers, you can get good high schools, you can get good universities. So like we are in France, we are selecting people through mathematics. If you're not good at mathematics, it's more difficult to get good studies afterwards. So this is a first reason. And so when you talk about mathematics, then you are also orienting where people are going. So that's also why France has so many Fields Medal in the world. The Fields Medal is a Nobel Prize for mathematician, and I think in the overall history of this medal, we have in France 5 mathematicians, and we are on the podium at least, or maybe first. So France is very good at selecting and also promoting mathematics. So that would be the first reason, I think. And the second one also is industries. We have plenty of industries which were focused on security, with Gemalto, Oberture, IDEMIA, which are or were the leaders in the world in security.
Well, and so let's come around to the security of Ledger, and a nice segue there is that in many ways in Ledger's founding, the realization was that this technology, which was developed in France but used all over the world, chip and pin technology, which is in everyone's credit card, could be a great way to protect cryptocurrency as well. So the other thing that we talk about at Ledger is resilience or security by design, right? So there's an assumption kind of baked into it that it you must have the secure design or you don't have security. So expand on that a little bit for me. What does that mean specifically in the business of Ledger?
Yes, definitely. So what you are referring to is smart card technology. This technology starts to be a little old. It started, I think, almost 40 years ago. It has been invented 40 years ago. But the chip we are using now are definitely very different from the first version of smart cards. And smart card is a very tiny chip. where there is not much computation power, not much memory, not much things, but it's really specialized in one thing, like security, cryptography. And from a threat model perspective, it's a good practice because you are splitting your application from the security part of the application. So when you think about your system and you want to make sure it's secure, you already have a hardware isolation between your application and the security. And when you think about designing your system, it's really easier to think about that. You have the security on one side and you can focus on this, what are the interface, what comes in, what goes out, how it's implemented inside. And you can focus also on the application, but those things are completely separate. So this is really a good practice. And then during these 40 years, like the technology within smart cards has improved a lot, and the bar for security has also increased a lot. And then it's a cat and mouse game where attackers and evaluation laboratory are finding better attacks, and vendors need to adapt and to improve the security. And what also happened is that they have, like the vendor, the industry created a certification scheme. I think at first it was to put a barrier of entry to competitors. So they created this framework so that if you don't have the certification, you can't sell your smart card to banks or to state for IDs and so on. And this certification scheme is such that in order to get the certification, you have to go through an evaluation process and to pass the bar for security. And this bar always increase, is always better, or more difficult to reach, because the evaluator, because the state-of-the-art attacks evolve and attacks becomes more and more efficient and so on. So that means that the vendor needs to adapt and to create more secure product. So that's why today it's more difficult than ever to break such circuits.
So we talk about the fact that there's a secure element inside of Ledger devices, and you described, kind of the model with that. But what actually makes a secure element secure compared to, because there are some competitor products which don't use a secure element, and then you also have, and maybe juxtapose that again with the secure element that's inside of, some cell phones, but which is also different from what's inside of a Ledger device. So give us, for someone who's, who maybe has only a surface understanding of the technology, what's the difference and what's the importance for me as a consumer when I'm, making a choice on which device I'm buying?
So when you think about smart card technology, it's been designed for banking system and also for identity. And in this case, there are two main properties that they want to fulfill. The first one is being like extraction of secret, which are inside the smart card, must be very, very difficult. That means that you can give your banking card to an attacker, and even with a very large amount of time, of money, of equipment, expertise, it will be extremely difficult to extract secret. So this is the first property they want to fulfill. And the second one is integrity. They want to make sure that the code running inside the secure element is the genuine one and it has not been tampered. So this is basically the two main properties they want to fulfill. In their case, the secret which is inside your banking card or your passport is not yours. It's the bank's one. It's the state's one, but still they don't want you to steal the secret inside. So we are using the same technology, but in a little bit different way. Meaning that the secret that we put inside the smart card are user secret. So this is a big difference for
there comes the decentralization. I love that, by the way.
Exactly.
I just want to recap that for the listener. Like, if the same technology is used to protect the secrets of banks and governments. And so if you look at passports and credit cards, there are banks and governments secrets that are stored there, and they use a secure element because they want those secrets to be difficult or near impossible to extract. And what Ledger did was it says, hey, we could actually use that same technology to store the secrets of individuals. So again, when you think about sort of, the sovereign individual, and decentralization, and you think so. It's interesting that the very architecture of Ledger and the way that it uses security is to protect the secrets of individuals, and it's actually using technology that has been used to protect the secrets of banks and governments to protect the secrets of individuals. There's something that feels important about that to me in the history of humanity. So sorry, that's why I wanted to pause on it.
Yeah, that's true, and it's really well summarized. So we are using the same technology because it's a good technology, but we are using it in a better way. And the security property we need to fulfill are similar, meaning that we want to make sure that if ever you lose your device, it will be extremely difficult to for an attacker to extract the secret, even with a lot of expertise, lot of time, equipment, and money. So yeah, this is a very important property. But also, when you use it, then the use case is a little bit different from when you use your banking card. For different reasons. One of the reasons is immutability. When you do transaction with your banking card, at the end, if ever something goes wrong, there is an insurance, you can revert transaction, and so on. With blockchain, with decentralization, this is not something possible. If you do a transaction that you didn't want to, it's done. There is nothing you can do to revert. There is no centralized entity which allows you to get back your money and so on. So this is why security is even more important on our side. So the three properties I was mentioning are, the first one is you want to generate your own secrets in a secure manner within an enclave. So what I call an enclave is a secure place where the secrets are generated. So in our case, this is the secure element inside our devices. So this is the first property. The second property is your secret must never leave the enclave. In practice, that means that the cryptography must be implemented inside the enclave. When you sign a transaction, the computation of this digital signature must happen within the enclave. So this is what we are doing. Our operating system is implemented inside the enclave, and when you sign a transaction, this signature is computed inside the enclave. In our case, there is a third property we want to fulfill, is a way for a user to understand in a trusted manner what he is about to do. He is about to consent for sending this amount of Bitcoin to this specific address. So this is why we have connected a screen directly to the secure element, because you can't trust your mobile, you can't trust your desktop. If ever there is a malware which makes you think you are sending Bitcoin to me while the malware actually send it to the attacker, if you don't have a trusted way to verify this, you will simply lose all your crypto, even if your secrets are secured inside the smart card. So this is the three properties are really at the core of everything we do, and this is our threat model basically. If you don't lose your secret, if you don't lose your backup, and if you verify all the time what you are doing on your device on the trusted display, you won't lose your crypto. This is a Ledger promise.
So this is great. And so I want to ask you, I want to anticipate sort of some of the questions from our users and listeners. I think it's a great opportunity to have you here, because I think, the way I look at this is, as a human being on planet Earth, I'm going to have important digital assets in the future, right? It might be my crypto money. It might be my art collection. It might be the title to my car or the deed to my house. And ultimately, it will probably be my passport, right? So I have things that I just can't afford to lose. So the choices I make on how to store them are going to be incredibly important. Okay, so I could store them in a software wallet on my phone or on my computer in my browser. Why shouldn't I do that?
Like desktop, smartphone, these things are really good things. They have been designed for performance, for UX, for many things, but not security. These are not designed for security. And as a developer, if you want to create a secure app, it's very difficult to isolate the security part of your application from the rest of your application. And even more difficult because you are running within a browser, which is running inside an operating system, which is running on your machine. And that means if there is any vulnerability in this chain, this vulnerability will be able to be exploited to extract your secret. So and today we have built very complex system. Like when you have a look on the web, like what is happening when you are clicking on Twitter or anything is very complex. When you click on Twitter, if you want to understand the chain of consequences which makes you tweet, it's very, very complex. So if you want to secure such system, it's very difficult because the systems are very complex. So that's why putting secret within your browser or software wallet in general is a very bad idea. And these systems are not secure because it's simply impossible to secure them. They are too complex.
Okay, so dumb question. So how is it possible that I can secure a browser wallet with Ledger?
Yeah, just because what I explained before, we are isolating the security part of your Web3 journey from the rest of the journey. All the application is running on your browser in Ledger Live. All the UX is there. But as soon as it comes to the security part, everything is isolated within this hardware device, which does only one thing, securing your secret and making you aware of what you are about to consent in terms of signature, transaction, and so on.
I think that's the important bit, and I want to just make sure that people really understand that. So I guess, a software wallet, so either a software wallet on the phone or a software wallet in your browser, it's unsecured by Ledger, separating the security aspect of it, kind of violates all three of the security pieces, right? Because the secrets are not kept somewhere safe. The computation is not done somewhere safe, and yep. I can't trust the display. And I think that's a very interesting point because people talk about, we need software wallets to scale. But the reality is that software wallets run on hardware in all cases. And if you don't have a trusted display, then you don't have security. Is that accurate?
Yeah, totally. And when you think like adversarial thinking, like you will check what is the attack surface, what will be the easiest way to find a way to get access to defense. And if you don't have the three properties, already you have a hole. You can think directly to this specific thing. And for the trusted display, it's quite easy. You will implement a malware which makes you think that you have to consent for receiving an NFT. You click on this, and actually what you actually do is just sending all your wallet to something else.
Okay, so let's look at another type of product. There are products in the market which say they're hardware wallets, but they don't have a secure element. What I always say, there's some people who tell me they have a competitive wallet, and I always say to them, okay, cool. How about this? I'll trade you. For 24 hours, I'll borrow yours, you borrow mine. I'll give you my Ledger, you give me your other wallet, and then we'll swap back in 24 hours. No one has taken me up on that offer yet, But to your point, the reason there is because the seeds are relatively easy to extract, and in the donjon, I think it's worth saying, you guys have cracked basically every software wallet, and any wallet that doesn't use a secure element. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. So to your point about software wallet, when I started to discuss with the dungeon, asking them to showcase to the people that it's very easy to break a software wallet, they were like, "What do you want me to do? It's obvious that software wallets are insecure. I just want to do a demo." So they were like, "Okay, I will do a demo." So they did a couple of videos showing how to extract and drain a wallet from a software wallet, but they didn't get the point at first.
Exactly. I just want to make sure the audience understands that it's true that when I started in this job, Charles and I were trying to get the dungeon to show how to break software wallets, and they didn't want to do it because it's too easy to do. I think that at some point you told me, like, this is the job we give interns on their first day in the dungeon. So if you want to know how easy it is to break a software wallet, it's so easy that our security team doesn't even want to talk about it, and it's the job they give to interns on their first day of the job.
This is well said. So first of all, what I want to say about hardware wallet is it's infinitely more secure than a software wallet. On a hardware wallet, if things are well implemented, let's say, if you don't have a physical access to the device, it can be extremely difficult, even impossible to extract the funds from the wallet. This is something we have to say. But when we want to compare Ledger from other hardware wallets, in terms of security, physical security, as you said, you can swap your Ledger against another wallet and you can sleep relatively well. I would sleep well, at least. And when
I'll tell you just one anecdotal story. I had my assistant who she was new on the job not that many months ago, and I had left my personal Nano like in a conference room or something, and she texts me and she was like, Ian, you left your Nano. I've got it for you. What do you want me to do with it? And I said, oh, just put it on my desk, which is in the open, right? I don't have an office door that locks or anything. She said, really? I said, sure. Yeah, just leave it. I'll get it tomorrow. And then I came back in, and again, she was new on the job and learning Ledger. And she said to me, the product is really secure, isn't it? She said, you weren't worried at all. I was like, oh no, I wasn't worried. I wouldn't have left like my AirPods on the desk, right? Because the cleaning crew will come in and sweep them up, right? But I sleep fine with my Nano. So I take your point about sleeping well.
And I remember like 2 years ago, I was in a conference and I wanted to give away a device to someone, and we didn't have any device anymore. So I simply gave mine. I was like, you just have to reset it and you have a device.
Exactly.
Like, I can? Yeah, do it.
Well, and it's so funny because it's such a key thing for people, because the first question, and it's a very natural question people ask, is, but wait, if I lose this device, I'm screwed, right? And it's like, once you understand that you're not, and once you understand, in fact, there could be a reason you'd want to cross a border with only the 24 words and not the device, right? Only then do you kind of understand the power of what we're talking about here and the implications it might have, on the future.
And yeah, what I wanted to say is when we were building the dungeon, like all this expertise around security, cryptography, and hardware security, especially, in order to make sure that we were building the right tool and so on, we started to study the hardware wallet in the competition, and this is when we started to break all of this hardware wallet, just because they are built around general purpose MCU. General purpose MCU are great for building remote controller or toaster or anything, but they are not made for security. So if you have a physical access to them, it can be relatively easy to extract secret from these devices.
Now, and the criticism, if you search on Twitter, a criticism you'll find about Ledger relative to those devices also is that it's not open source. So how do you respond to that particular critique that Ledger is not open source, which is not entirely true. So, but also there are parts that are not open source. So, how do you respond to the criticism?
Yeah, you said it's not entirely true. I would say it's 95% false. I think 95% of our code is open source.
What is open source? Just for those who think, and maybe somebody's like believe the bullshit that idiots talk on Twitter that says Ledger is not open source. So what is open source?
Open source means different things, but the first property of open source is that you are sharing your source code to anyone, to view it, to verify it, to audit it. But also it depends on the license. You can also provide the rights to others to use it, to build product and so on. But there are differences for that. And one of the criticism we used to have on this specific thing is that our operating system, the one running inside the enclave, is partly closed source, and there is a reason for that. In the smart card world, as I was mentioning earlier, when you do certification, in order to get through to go through this evaluation and certification, you have to implement some control of who has access to what, and confidentiality of how your smart card is built is something important to get the certification. That means that for the smart card manufacturer, in order to get this certification, they must prove to the auditor that the way their device is built is quite confidential. They are doing this for security, but also to keep their competitive advantage. And when we are working with a secure element manufacturer, in our case, this is ST Microelectronic, we have to sign an NDA proving them that we won't reveal any kind of information about their design. And if we would open source this very part of the operating system running on the secure element, we would reveal some of the secret, some of their secret sauce, which makes their secure element secure, and we would be in breach of this NDA. So this is the most reason, the main reason why this operating system is not open source. So this is the first thing I wanted to say. And because some other wallet manufacturer, for them, I think about Trezor, for instance, being open source is more important than anything. But on my side, if I have to find a trade-off between security and open source, for me, security is more important. I prefer having a secure device which is not completely open source rather than something open source which is not completely secure. So this is.
Do you think 100% open source and I definitely consider you both a security maximalist and a transparency maximalist, knowing you personally. And so I understand the trade-off that you're saying there. So, I think that you prefer transparency for all of the right reasons. And which is why we're 95% open source, and you've got that 5%, which is not for the reasons that you said. And I also understand you're doing that because you're making an important trade-off. And when you're given the trade-off, you choose security. Do you think that it's possible to achieve the level of security with 100% open source? And is that something that happens over time? Like, what's your opinion on where this goes?
If you build your own secure element, your own smart card, you could simply open source your operating system. First, it's very, very difficult to build a secure element. You have industry which have built this expertise during 40 years and thousands of people and so on. So it's very, very difficult to catch up. This is the first one. But the second one is also, you would like to have some, if you are quite maximalist in this area about open source and about being able to make sure there is no backdoor in the device and so on, because this is one of the reasons why we would like open source. The problem is for the circuit itself. When you build your circuit in an open source manner, probably. The question is, okay, you have your GDS2, which is your source code for the circuit. You send it to the IC manufacturer, and you will get back a circuit. How can you be sure there is no, the match is 100%? How can you be sure the circuit is the one coming from your source code? When it's only software, you can just clone the GitHub. You can build it on your machine, and you can verify that the software you are running is the same that you have compiled. When it's electronic, this is not possible to do that. So even if you are quite maximalist in this area, and some are trying to do that, and I think it's a good idea to try to build open source secure element, but even if you go far in that direction, you won't have the same certainty that you have with open source software.
Interesting. It's a super interesting topic, and it's an important one because it's one that, like I said, it's one that we hear as a critique. So I want to know, why people, should still choose Ledger. And I guess there's a couple other alternatives to Ledger that I want to explore. You talked about software wallets. Software runs on hardware, and increasingly our phones, whether they're Apple phones or Google phones or Samsung phones, they do have secure elements in them. So why is it that these things inside of our cell phones aren't basically like a ledger inside of my phone? Isn't that what it is?
I know what you mean, but as a developer, as an Android developer or iPhone developer, if I want to build a software wallet which would leverage the secure element inside the phone, first of all, there is an issue because you can't build code within the secure element. What you have is only a set of API allowing you to discuss with the trust zone or the keychain in the case of iPhone. And so that means you could generate or at least store your secret within the secure element. So you would have the first property. But the problem is they don't implement like Bitcoin transaction. They don't implement Ethereum smart contract interaction. They don't implement this. So as soon as you want to derive an address or sign a transaction, what you would have to do as a software developer, Android app developer, is to ask to this trust zone or this secure element key store to provide you the secret in the app, which run in the rich operating system, in the rich OS, and then compute the cryptography. So that means that the second property is not fulfilled. If you have a malware on your iPhone or Android, it just has to monitor your software wallet, and as soon as your software wallet will use your private key, the malware will be able to extract it. So you don't have the second property. And the most difficult one, so we could say maybe in the future, Android and iOS will implement like Bitcoin transaction signature in the operating system, which will improve security. But even if this happen, you will still have the problem of trusted display. As a user, you want to send 0.1 Bitcoin to me, so you prepare your transaction in the software wallet, and then the software wallet will ask the secure element to sign it, and then you will have a signed transaction that you can broadcast. The problem is, at the moment where the secure element is signing your transaction, the secure element has no way to know what you did consent. So probably you consent for sending 0.1 Bitcoin to me, while the secure element is signing a transaction, draining all your wallet to an attacker. So this is the third property which is missing. It's impossible to have a trusted display on Android phone or iPhone today.
So I think this is incredibly interesting, and I think this is super helpful for our listeners, right? Because, as a listener, you lots of people will tell you like, oh, we're using the secure enclave, so therefore, and so what you're doing is you're giving people, a very practical way of looking at this. One, are your secrets stored somewhere which is incredibly difficult to extract? Two, are the computations being done inside of a secure zone? And three, do you have secure display? Right. So if we look at, in the case of a software wallet, none of the three are met. To your point about a hardware wallet, you are segregating your a competitive hardware wallet. You are segregating the security transactions, somewhere that's not your computer, therefore quite safe. But if someone has physical access to the device and it's not using a secure element, then it's likely possible to extract those seeds, or certainly, imaginable. In the case of, say a phone that has a secure thing, a secure element, perhaps you have the first thing solved, which is the seeds are stored in a secure place. The seed is stored in a secure place. But since you have to remove that seed, and input it basically into the operating system to make use of it, because the APIs of the trust zone, et cetera, don't allow for cryptographic operations, therefore, boom, number two is broken. And in any case, you don't have a secure display. So I think that's a super helpful framework for people to understand.
And I have two things to add. The first thing is, even if there is a Strongbox on Android which implements a secure element, like Strongbox is available and only on the last version of Android. And as a software wallet developer, if I want to do a software wallet, what will I do? I will do a software wallet which runs on every single Android in the world. So they don't even use this Strongbox capability because it's not supported on most phones. So today, software wallet don't even use this capability, which would provide the first property at least. But they don't even use it.
They don't even use it. So even though it might be available, it's probably not used. Or
it's not used. I've never seen a software wallet which use it. And the second thing is, like, security is not an or thing. This is an and thing. You need the third property. 2 is not 2/3. No, 2 is 0.
So I know, and I could do this all day. Plus, by the way, I want to talk about enterprise security with you, but we don't have time today. So I think maybe we should do a separate show where we just talk about enterprise security.
With pleasure. I can tell you how we built this thing. This is a long story.
It'd be a good one. Yeah. Let's do that for a proper one. I think, I want to turn to Stax, because we've just announced Ledger Stax this week. And I want to talk about specifically, the challenges securing Ledger Stax. But before we do, there are a couple other, because there's a device that we can see that's coming that doesn't have a display and does have biometrics. And, I'm curious, I'm just personally curious, why would somebody build a hardware device that doesn't have a display, so therefore no secure display, and includes biometrics, which I know from you and other colleagues at Ledger you wouldn't recommend? So can you just speak to that design decision?
This is not my design decision, so I cannot really explain it. But yeah, about biometrics, I think biometrics is an interesting technology again, but the problem is
so when we say biometrics, by the way, we're talking about a fingerprint or Face ID or retinal ID, one of these type of things.
Yeah, for instance. So the problem is how to use it. Like, I think like biometric is login. It's not passwords. Passwords are secrets that can be rotated. It's simple. Passwords are secrets that can be rotated.
Yeah,
like biometrics,
you can change a password.
Exactly.
You can't change your biometrics.
Biometrics are public thing. Like your face is public, your fingerprint is public. So it's not a secret and it can't be rotated. So biometrics can be something interesting, but it can't replace secrets.
Very well said. Okay, I'm putting that to memory. Okay, and what about the decision to have a device with no screen?
Yeah, again, so the third property I mentioned earlier still holds. If you want to secure, manage, and use your assets, you need these three properties. And the one you are referring to is a different wallet with a different model, with a different trust model, and it's also a little bit less decentralized. You're a little bit less autonomous part of. Because this is also something which is very important for us. We don't want users to have to trust us. We don't want users to need Ledger to use their device. Like if tomorrow Ledger is dead for any reason or disappears because there is a nuke in Paris or I don't know, if something happens, you still have your device and you are still on your own. You don't need us to operate, to manage, and to secure your crypto. And you can, if you don't like our product anymore, you have your backup and you can recover your backup on any other device. And that's it. It's your money. It's your identity. It's your valuable. You can do whatever you want to do. We just provide you with the tools allowing you to be secure and to manage it properly. And if you are referring to block, the model is very different and you have to rely and trust a little bit their infrastructure. So this is also another difference.
Got it. So in the case, in that model, if block goes away, then the user is not able to access their funds anymore.
Yeah, the funds are locked in the blockchain forever.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm really like running up on time, but we've got a very important topic to finish up with here. So we launched or announced Ledger Stax this week, a project that the team's been working on for about 18 months now. So, and really, correct me if I'm wrong, but architecturally, it's the same as the Ledger Nano. So from a security architecture perspective, it's the same as the Ledger Nano and has one very key difference. It's got the world's first curved e-ink touchscreen. So, same, so that same chip, if I'm not wrong, that powers the small display on the Ledger Nano has to power a much more complicated display, and that's the main thing. So how did you approach that? So Tony Fadell comes in and says we're going to make an incredible UI on top of your security architecture. What were the first thoughts, and how did you approach that then from a security challenge perspective?
Yeah, so. Often, like security and UX, this is a cursor. This is a trade-off. And when the discussion started, I was like, will it be possible to drive this kind of display on a secure element? I was a little bit unsure. So we discussed with Tony, we discussed with the teams in order to study it. But I remember that there has been a quite long period of uncertainty where we were not sure. We didn't know if it would be possible eventually. So we worked on that, and finally we found a technical way to solve this challenge. Also, we wanted the screen to be like as simple as possible. We didn't want to that this screen embed like a a circuit with a firmware, with some logic and so on, in order to minimize the attack surface. This was also a challenge because like some screen embed MCU, which with some logic, with a firmware that can be updated. So we didn't want to have this. So there were this kind of challenges, but finally we succeeded to manage it, and it works very well. And then there was also plenty of ideas, adding new interface and so on, and it raised new security challenges. So this is where we worked with the dungeon. Like we discussed about how the security architecture would be, and then we try to break it. This is what we did, because we do that all the time. So we started with an architecture, and then we iterated, because we found some weakness, some vulnerabilities, and this is the iterative process, which allowed us to implement the UX that Tony and you had in mind, and without compromising with security, because this is our value proposition. This is what we are offering. But again, if your product is so secure, but the UX is so poor that no one uses it, at the end you don't solve anything. You don't solve the problem that needs to be solved, because no one will use it. So what I think we succeeded to do is to keep the same level of security while drastically improving the UX. I think probably we could do better in the future. It's still the challenge, but this iteration is really improving drastically the UX while never compromising with security.
And thank you. I think it's like to me, it's been really beautiful to watch. You know, what I've been saying is that, you know, Ledger has this truly uncompromising value system around security and self-custody. If you look back the last 7 years of the company, there are plenty of people who wanted to say, let's build a software wallet, let's build something centralized. And it was always, saying sort of, no to short-term, profits and yes to, long-term security and self-custody. At the same time, with Tony, you've got, and Tony brought with him a number of people who had worked on the iPod, worked on the iPhone, and are equally uncompromising on user experience, right? And we really, I think, it's challenged to put those two worlds together. As you said, it's a cursor that has to move, and we can't compromise on security or self-custody, and we've got to get as far as we can on usability. I was just going to tell two anecdotes and then have you comment on them. One was when we have the screen, and they and then they're giving us samples for the screen, and they want to send a driver. And I just remember I think it was you actually. It could have been Raf, but I think it was you, because I can picture you very politely saying, "No, thank you, we don't need the driver." And everybody turned their head a little bit and went, "What are you talking about?" The screen company, the Apple guys, even on our side, were like, "What do you mean you don't want the driver? What did you mean?"
Yeah, I just meant that we want to understand very well how the screen is working and how to discuss directly with it. So, and this is implemented within the secure element. So within the secure element, we can talk directly to the display and understand very well what's going on. And there is no firmware, no logic. Everything is damn simple. And this is how you can ensure the security. Everything is simple, everything is there, and that's it.
I think in the conversation, they said, "What do you mean you don't want the driver?" And you said, "Well, who wrote it?" And they said, "Well, we don't really know." And I said, you said, "Well, where was it written?" And they said, "China, we guess." And you just said, "No, thanks. I don't want it." So
we'll just simply understand how this thing works, and we will drive it.
And that's the thing I think that people need to appreciate about the space, about security, and about Ledger. We were talking to a major chip manufacturer recently, you and I. And they told us, that they're very good at security, and they have many chip offerings that are secure. And then they understood the security of Ledger, and they said, "Wait, you secure all the way to the display?" And you said, "Yes, of course, it's a necessity." And they sort of like went, "Wow, that's secure." Like they hadn't really considered securing the display in the past. And I think, to me, that is the thing that people need to understand, is that we are, entering a new era, an era where digital assets are, and digital asset security is actually very crucial to your life. And then I think that they assume that maybe the very smart people at the makers of the devices that we have in our hands and on our desks have anticipated this revolution. But the reality is they haven't at all. and even the major chip manufacturers, none of them have secured all the way through to the inputs and outputs.
Yeah, but the reason why is like no one predicted this blockchain revolution. Like it was difficult to understand, at least like 10 years ago. Of course, even 5 years ago, it was very difficult to predict that this would be a very big revolution and that every single human on the planet would use digital assets and will self-custody. This was difficult to predict. Now it's quite clear, at least for me, but yeah, it starts to be very clear for everyone. And when you really understand the purpose of blockchain, you understand that self-custody is important. And because of the immutability of blockchain and so on, like the problem of security is paramount. Like you can't compromise security because there is no possibility to revert a mistake. There is no possibility to revert an attack and so on. So that's why like security is paramount and you can't compromise.
I know we need to wrap up, so I'd like to make. This is really fun, by the way. I feel like I could go another hour as so many other, and I think that people would find it really interesting. So you and I should do this more regularly for the podcast audience. I had someone recently ask me an honest question. They said, are there any of the competitor devices that you think are interesting? And there are certainly some that are interesting for different reasons. I don't want to dismiss things out of hand, but I think sort of structurally there are two things that I don't see anywhere else. One is the security by design without compromise, which is really what we've discussed mostly on this podcast. But there's one other thing that I don't see anyone else as advanced on as Ledger, and that is actually having built an operating system on top of these secure elements. If I'm not mistaken, Ledger is really the only open development environment on top of a secure element. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I would like to think that Ledger's success is because of security. I think it's partly the case, but it's also because of the open platform. Our device embeds not a monolithic firmware, but an operating system. So that means that as a developer, like you have built your own blockchain, your own dApp, your own thing, and you need security. Then you can simply build the very tiny part which implements only the security within the enclave. This is something we are providing. Like we have an open platform, open operating system, which enables anyone in the world to implement your security, the security part of your application within this enclave. And this is not something possible anywhere in the world, and we have the only one open operating system, especially running on the secure element, but also even on the harder wallet space. This is also the case.
So, to me, this feels like the early days of computing, right? When do you have a good can anyone build on top of your platform or not, right? I mean, if you're a monolithic system, then you might have some interesting. I might be an interesting video game console, but I'm not. I don't have the kind of openness, that you would need to be a full computing system. So the way I think about it is this, and I'm curious if I have this right. If I think about alternatives to Ledger, that I might choose, personally, I rule them out because they either violate one or all three of the kind of requirements for security that you mentioned, that we spent the majority of the talk talking about, or they lack that open architecture, which means the cool things that come tomorrow are probably not going to be available there, for some period of time, where they'll be built for Ledger quite quickly because of the open architecture. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's totally accurate, and we have plenty of people who wants to build on top of Ledger, and they simply do it. And then we have a security review process, and we have so much request that our security review process is not always as fast as we would like. But yeah, this is how we build this overall ecosystem. And you want to build your own application, you just have to write your app. It's easy.
Okay, one last thing. Ledger Stax is all the security of Ledger with this much more beautiful display. You told us that was a challenge to get to harden. Another anecdote I was going to tell was of when the dungeon, started trying to break the display, I could tell that some of the Apple engineers were like, well, wait a minute, your guys are trying to break what we just built? And the answer was yes. It's, again, I think people are like, you guys are serious about security, aren't you? It's almost always a surprise. Like, no, we're really serious about security. But also, you were talking about, kind of the positive side of getting to that ease of use. And so I'm curious. I know that, since I've joined the company and Ari and I are American loudmouths, we managed to get the word out in maybe a sensational way often about Ledger. But I'm curious, how do you feel about kind of, us becoming, almost, a company that's not only secure, but also important in culture. And I'm curious for our listeners, like from your perspective as a CTO, do you find that we're like compromising on security as we're sort of becoming, more of a cultural icon, or are we managing to keep it in balance?
I remember when you joined, you were saying that your objective was to go from business to geek, from business to business to customer. And I was like, that's interesting. And yeah, I think we are still a little bit business to geek because our products are quite for techie at least. And I really think like mass adoption is something really important. Otherwise, like the blockchain revolution, the Web3 revolution won't happen. And it needs to happen. It's important. And in order for this revolution to happen, I think like security is paramount. It won't happen otherwise. And also ease of use is definitely very important. And what you brought is to this story is like this ease of use and the cultural aspect of blockchain. Like it's not only about cryptography. This is what I like, but this is not about only about cryptography. This is about different use cases. This is about storing something which is valuable for you, and what is valuable for you can be art, can be cryptocurrency, can be identity, can be access to services. It can be anything, and this is where you are very good at seeing this thing on the long run.
Thanks, man. I love doing that. We really have to do this again. I think you know this already. I tell you this at least once a month, probably more often. But I love working with you. I think we're a pretty great team. Same
for me. Same for me. I learned so much from you. This is great working with you as well.
Nah, I've learned a tremendous amount from you. We're both, computer science background, but different generations, different applications, and man, I feel super lucky to get to continue to learn. So thanks for bearing with me. I really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us today. I hope it's helpful for the audience as well, and. Thanks to everything that you and the team did to help get Ledger Stax out the door. I mean, honestly, especially in this last month, that had nothing to do with FTX, in fact. But if you look at what we did on the ground as a team, from firmware to Ledger Live to hardware, the teams that are in Asia right now, like literally hand carrying back the devices for us to have at the event next week. We're recording this the week before Ledger Open happened to come out the week after. But man, I don't think there's any team in the world that could have done this except for this one. So, good work, leading that team, man. Thank you.
Yeah, we can be proud collectively, I think.
All right. Thanks again. Thanks for doing this, Charles. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Jan. See you.
This content is provided for informational purposes only and is the sole expression of our opinion and should not be relied upon as legal, business, investment, or tax advice. Do your own research. Any loss or profit is your sole responsibility. Stay safe.